Alrighty, hello, good day. It's already that time for SCD stories, and today I certainly have a doozy. Over the past month and a half or so, we have dealt with and heard from families, individuals who are dealing with sickle cell at a personal level. Mothers, fathers, and children, and those who have grown up and now dealing with what it means now as an adult with sickle cell. Today, we have a special guest. This guest is dear to my heart, not just because of the work they do in advocacy with sickle cell disease, but because of their commitment. And personally, I've worked with this person as of about 19 years ago. And you've got to hear this. So we're going to start with this interview. I'm going to bring on Deborah Brizard, who's here with us to talk about her hands-on work with sickle cell disease. Sometimes that means at an emergency room. Oftentimes that means in the home with a family who's grieving the loss of their loved one. Oftentimes it's following a surgery or right before, counseling and guiding families and support groups. There's so many things this woman does. You deserve to know what parts of sickle cell you have no idea about because of how the work that's done behind the scenes with people like Deborah Brizard. So why don't you go ahead and help join me in welcoming her right after we hear a word from our sponsor.
An average day in our household is really crazy.
We're juggling a lot, so finding time for each other can be pretty tough. Mealtime definitely brings us together.
Being able to come together at the table to eat and laugh, it's just fulfilling to our souls.
Bon appetit.
Teach your children well.
That's the time that we have together in this crazy world that is family.
Alrighty, we're back and it's time. We're going to hear from Deborah Brizard, and let's go ahead and do this now. Deborah, welcome today to SCD Stories. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Deborah, you and I met, I think 19 years ago, almost to the very month or so. And, it's amazing. You've been at it since then. What's going on? Why, as a person with a background in mental health and social work and so forth, why sickle cell?
Well, 19 years ago, I was approached by then the founder, Dr. Donald Spidner, and yourself, quite frankly. You all were looking for a social worker, someone to come aboard and help to develop the direct services support system that Dr. Spidner had envisioned for the program. Sickle cell was a disease that I was not very familiar with, but I was very interested in learning more about it. And the fact that it's still even today considered the forgotten disease, and we're dealing with a forgotten population. I wanted to take my knowledge, skills, and abilities, all the things that I had honed and worked on when I worked for Dauphin County Mental Health. And I wanted to take that and I wanted to put that to use to work for a population that I felt was and still is greatly underserved. And again, a forgotten population.
A forgotten population. So, after hearing from some of the families in their children, and then some of the kids have become adults, I've noticed something. Almost like those who've been to war and they're veterans, they can touch the surface, but it's so painful to discuss. It's oftentimes some of those things are kept inside. As a social worker, it's a different thing for you. What's to the depth of this? How serious is this? Are people really having 3 to 5 strokes before the age of 2? Are people really, having a complete bone marrow transplant? Talk to me a little bit about the devastation that's often can't be discussed by the person, so that our listeners who wonder why should they contribute their time or their money, their resources towards sickle cell disease. Is this stuff really real? What from a social worker standpoint, what's that like?
I can tell you now, not only is it real, it is devastatingly real. Not only are they dealing with the physical challenges, the medical challenges, they're also dealing with the psychosocial challenges related to those medical challenges that they face, like strokes. You mentioned also amputations. And in fact, I have a client in my population right now who has already lost one leg,
Oh, wow.
and she is struggling right now to try to keep the other leg. I have a gentleman also that is in our program who has been hospitalized no less than 22 times within the last year and a half, and he's undergone just about that many surgeries trying to save his left arm as well as his right leg and his foot. So yes, those challenges are very real. I have another young man who recently had brain surgery
Hmm.
to address a brain bleed that he was experiencing, and post-op he
Hmm.
was dealing with some cognitive challenges whereby for a while he was actually functioning at a very young age level, like age 8, age 9. And this is a young man who is 18, 19 years old now.
Hmm. So, you're listening to it here at SCD Stories. There's stories that often can't be told by the individuals or their families. You're hearing it right here. Not only is it real, if you noticed, in our interviews, you're not able to hear about the amputations and the fight to avoid even or reduce the options of having another one. You're not hearing about some of these things that we're talking about, the brain bleeds directly dealing with what happens is in cases like this, and I'm guessing, Deborah, that when it gets to these critical times, your phone's ringing. I'm
Oh,
guessing that you don't even maybe you work 9 to 5, but there is no limit on when you can be contacted to aid an individual or their family with this stuff.
officially, my work hours are 8 to 5.
Hmm.
Officially,
Okay.
but in reality, I work 24/7. To be honest, I'm on duty. I need to be there for my clients 24/7 because you never know when a crisis is going to strike. You never know when they're going to need my assistance in some way and somehow. And so I need to be available to my clients, and not just to my clients, but we look at it from a holistic point of view, a family centered holistic point of view.
Hmm.
So we're not just trying to assist and address the needs of the client, but we're also trying to address the needs of the family members, because this is not chronic illness is not something that you face in a vacuum. What affects one in the family can absolutely affect everyone else in the family in one way or another. And so, again, my job, because we are a small organization, and I am the social worker, the case manager, the counselor, the advocate, I have to make myself be available basically 24/7 for my families.
You're hearing it right here. I'm talking today with Deborah Brizard, a social worker in central Pennsylvania, who's telling us about what families are going through from a different perspective. And you may ask, why donate? Many of you may have, well, it's that one black disease or so. You have, if you only knew that there are a lot more Deborahs around the world who give up 24 hours a day on call to find out what's next. Whether that person is calling because of potential suicide danger, or how the family deals with the loss, or how an individual deals with the loss of a limb and or faces the surgery of a lifetime of what 50-50 chances. You've heard it. If you want to know how you can donate and contribute, you can go to donatescd.com, or you could use the QR code at the top of the screen. Now, as we get back to talking with Deborah, let's find out, you know, what her perspective is. Why donate? What? How does? How do the funds really affect the family? People have asked this all over the world when it comes to raising money for nonprofits. When it comes to what's really going on. If money's given towards such a disease, how are funds distributed? I mean, from a social worker standpoint, how does some of the money from the state at a state level, federal level, individual donor level, what kind of needs do families have that the funds actually impact them positively? Can you let us know that, Deborah?
Sure. Most of the families that we serve actually fall under in line with, they fall at the lower socioeconomic strata,
Sure.
which means they're already dealing with financial stressors.
Hmm.
Add to that the cost of medications.
Hmm.
Most are covered, but some are only covered to a certain amount. You still have co-pays that have to be paid. In some cases, depending on what the medication is, they are not covered, and that can be costly. When you're dealing with having to make a decision as to whether you buy food, whether you pay your electric bill, whether you buy medicine, those are very difficult choices to make for a person who is not dealing with necessarily a life threatening chronic illness. But when you're dealing with a life threatening chronic illness, it becomes even more vital that those supports be there for you. When they are not there, you absolutely see how it impacts our families, our clients, and our families, and just in their day to day living. It is a struggle. It is an absolute struggle.
Deborah, some of the things I'm aware of are phone calls. Let's say from an elementary school where two parents have COVID and they're not sure what to do with the child. I know of phone calls where parents have to risk losing their job and or lose it because they miss so many days because of needing to be at the hospital with their children. I'm thinking today of some who actually their job is at risk because they have to constantly have off days for procedures, in hospital crisis, and things like that. And when that happens, there's a loss of work and loss of income. Most aren't aware, Deborah, of the financial challenge that you're talking about around paying bills. And I mean, people who have no illnesses at all have issues with bills and having trouble bouncing back from economic challenges. But when you mix that with the medical, you mix that with the psychosocial, and unfortunately premature these funerals that are happening because of the disparity around access to care. I take my hat off that I'm not wearing. I should be wearing it to cover these one or two hairs I have left. But Deborah, I take my hat off to the work that you're doing, and I commend you. I know that you clearly could have walked away a few years ago and just said you're done for now because you've already dedicated much of your life towards it. Tell us, if you have something to say, if you could say something to our podcast listeners about why it would be important for them to make a commitment, even if it's as little as $5 a month. What would that message be? If you could tell them what would be a great reason for them to do that, as it relates to how it would impact the very families that you serve, what would that message sound like? What would you tell everyone?
First and foremost, you're making an impact on someone's life. Someone who may not know how they're going to pay again their electric bill. They may not know how they're going to even get groceries and have a meal the next day. They may not know how they're going to be able to afford the medicine that they so vitally need. But for some reason, it is not covered by the insurance, or else it's covered at such a low rate that you still have to go into your pocket and make up that difference. That makes a difference in the quality of life for a person, because it isn't just about living, it's about the quality of that life. It isn't just about going from day to day, living from day to day and trying to make it through that day. It's about giving someone hope for tomorrow,
Mhm.
just through your contribution, making that difference in someone's life. That is why I've stayed with the council all of these years, is because I want to make a difference. It takes a long time to build a bridge of trust with most of these people. Once you've done that, then the next step is you've got to try to find help for them, wherever that help is.
You've heard it right here. I'm talking with Deborah Brazard. She just poured her heart out and told you why it would be valuable, why it's important for you to even contribute. And I tell you, I mean, I'm a believer that we all should participate in making our world a better place, but certainly with your donation, the lives of the families are fighting this fight every single day. Hospitalization after hospitalization, lost job after lost job, lost limb, lost lives. One of the reasons I invited Deborah here, I had the great privilege and fortune. I was a much younger man when we interviewed and hired her for the role that she's still doing today. Long after I moved on, she stayed in the trenches fighting the fight. And I couldn't help it. I wanted to hear from her what she's been through, where the mileage has taken her, and thank God, into the lives and the households of many, not just in central Pennsylvania, many around the country who have migrated out to other areas, and unfortunately, many who are no longer with us. We have Deborah Brazard here. Deborah, I tell you, that day we interviewed you, I said to Dr. Spigner, who's no longer with us, we miss him dearly. I said to him, she's a lock. Her commitment to this and the things you were willing to do in that interview has certainly caught us by surprise at a time when we desperately needed someone to help us with social services. So, Deborah, now that we've had this conversation, our listeners have had an opportunity to hear from you what kind of things go on. I'm curious. I know you've been at this for a while. You're pushing 20 years in the field with these families. If you had an opportunity to tell the state where you live, in the state of Pennsylvania, what could be better? What could be made better to help this access to care, to reduce the casualties within this big fight against sickle cell disease? What message would that be? I want to know from our listeners, what could our federal government do better? What could be better from a social worker standpoint, and what could be better at the state level?
I think first and foremost, at both levels, we need more money. To put it very simply, we need more money to be able to do the things that we need to do for our client families. We need for our legislators to please learn more about sickle cell, to please learn about the devastating impact it has on people's lives. Again, not just the specific person who's diagnosed with it, but the entire family. The legislators can make a huge difference in the lives of these people who are already struggling, who are already part of a forgotten population. Make sickle cell disease a priority, which means allowing these people to become visible. They're no longer, I don't want them to continue being invisible. I don't want them to continue being a forgotten population. They need to be a population that is as vital as any other population in this world.
You've heard it right here. I'm talking to Deborah Brazard. And Deborah, wow, what an impact. Thank you for your years of service. I think of you like I do a lot of our military. You're fighting on behalf of others. You're fighting for a better future, and I'm grateful. Today, you've heard it at SCD Stories. Stay tuned for forthcoming episodes where you'll hear from others like Deborah who give their life to making this a better place. Most don't know it. The number one blood hereditary disease in the nation is sickle cell disease. However, it is disproportionately one of the least funded, and there needs to be a change so that we can make a difference in some of these future cures for things around the world. Some of the greatest leaders in front of us Many who've already been before, so you didn't even know that they've had it. Some who may not want to be judged or stigma by the fact that they have it. Some great athletes, musicians, political leaders, you didn't even know that they had it. But I want to let you know here today, you can be a difference with a donation of any size at donatescd.com and or using the QR code at the top of the screen. This is Dwayne Golden. Once again, thank you for listening to our podcast at scdstories.com. Take care. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for being here, my dear.
Thank you.